Welcome to the Strength and Courage podcast, a podcast focused on helping you lead with strength and courage in every situation you face. The Strength and Courage podcast is hosted by Ben Thomas and Hassan Kibirango. The Strength and Courage podcast is brought to you by our sponsor, Be to the World. Be to the World focuses on bringing fullness of life to the future of every child impacted by war. Stand with the millions of children in countries recovering from war so they can receive a transformative education. Start your journey as a Be to the World ambassador by making a monthly donation at www.betotheworld.org/donate. And now to Ben and Hassan for today's episode.
Hello and welcome to our Strength and Courage podcast with Ben Thomas and myself, Hassan Kibirango. We're excited for yet another episode. This is episode 10, and today we're going to be talking about a subject that I really love and I'm passionate about. I know that Ben Thomas is a visionary, and vision is one of the things that he exudes when I see him and interact with him. And today we're going to talk about vision. So Ben Thomas, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Hassan. So excited to be here, and excited to dive in today on vision with you.
Yeah. So when I think about vision, there's so many definitions of it. People come at it differently. What would your definition of vision or description of vision be?
Yeah, for me, my description of vision is calling out a future that is not yet in existence.
Wow.
So lots of companies talk about it differently. It's the why we do what we do and things like that. And that's fine when you think about a vision statement. But for me, when I think vision, I think what's a future that's not yet, but that should be. And so for me, that's what drives me when I think about vision. So I think about that in my family. So what do I want the future for my family to be that's not yet there? When I think about the organizations that I lead, what is that future that's there, that's not there yet? And that's what drives me. And oftentimes, vision for me, the way I look at it, is not even something that I expect to attain or achieve in my lifetime. So I try to think generationally. So what could be true 2, 3, 5 generations from now when it comes to a future that's not yet? And so that's what I want to put my heart and my hands and my feet to, is living out those visions to ensure that future generations from now, children are experiencing a much different set of circumstances than what is being planned for right now.
Wow. That's really an exciting, but also scary definition, because it seems, the way you put it, and I get it, but maybe just to lean in and break it a little bit more, is vision attainable then, or should we always look at it as an ideal to constantly pursue? And do you feel a tension and a fatigue there, that if it's something that I can't reach out to, help break it down for me?
Yeah, I would say it's not. Well, let me say this. It's often absurd. And I'm okay with that. Right? I'm often the one in the room that people are like, you're crazy. That'll never work. Okay, we'll see. And so it's not absurd in the sense of like, that's a terrible idea. Well, sometimes I have terrible ideas too, but it's often absurd in terms of the size of it. It's often absurd in terms of the scope of it. And it's often absurd when you think about, that's a long way from where you are now.
Sure. Yes.
But that's where I think it's Eugene Peterson. He has a great book called A Long Obedience in the Same Direction.
Wow.
And so for me, it's not thinking about what can I achieve just in a year or 2 years or 3 years, but it's really extending kind of our attention span, which, really since the introduction of the iPhone and Twitter and Facebook has gotten so much less and less. And so really being okay with, I believe God thinks in generations.
Wow.
I believe God thinks in, how often does he say, you and your children and your children's children and their children after that?
Yeah.
And so I really think naturally that's kind of the heart, the spirit that God's put in me. So it's not a matter of unattainable. And you certainly have to have measures and KPIs and all those things, benchmarks along the way. And I could talk through all of those with people, but it really is a matter of stating, okay, what's that future that's not yet in existence? What is it? For me, vision always starts with something that I don't put in my heart, but God has placed in my heart that sometimes takes me a while to discover, and then trusting him with those next steps along the way. So you have to have measures. You have to have milestones. And I'm a firm believer, Hassan, in celebrating along the way.
Yes.
Right? And so, I'll just, we've talked on previous episodes about the Kicks land. Right? So we're coming to you from Kigali, capital city in Rwanda, most densely populated country
in the world,
on the continent. And it's just to think I knew that the vision of Kicks could not be attained on our current campus. And so, and I got there by seeing what we were doing. I got there by learning from other schools, seeing what they had. I got there by seeing why were students leaving our school, even though we had all these great things. And it came down to facilities, space. And it's, like we're only on one block.
Yep.
And we used that space well, but we needed something bigger. And so I started to think and dream and learn and visit other places, and came back by saying, I want to buy as much land as possible.
Yeah. And you know what? I want us to use you as a case study and your journey of vision.
Yeah.
And specifically talking about, for example, Kicks, one of the things that blew my mind is how you were even able to procure more than 8 hectares of land in the city of Kigali. We all know how it's difficult to even get a hectare of land because, the city is growing so fast. There's barely any land left of that size. But I believe it plays into this mental picture that you had of calling out the future.
Yes.
Because there is something you were seeing and you're like, I need to secure certain things today to be able to handle what I see in the future. So Ben, how has the idea of vision played out in your life and in your leadership as you've served in different spaces?
Yeah, Hassan, I think it's before coming to Rwanda 8 years ago, I don't think anyone would have described me as a visionary. I think they would have described me as ambitious, and probably some people would have described it as a unhealthy ambition, which I didn't really see. I think I had these visions,
the rumblings in your heart,
and I didn't really know, in my late 20s, early 30s, what to really do with that. And so for me, even coming to Kigali, I was in the second year of my doctoral program, and we were visiting 19 different mission and development agencies in Chiang Mai, Thailand.
Wow.
And learning from them. And every time we would always study their vision and mission statements. And I had my second interview with the Kicks board while I was in Chiang Mai. I think back in the day it was on Skype. I was from my hotel in Thailand, somehow calling back here to Rwanda where internet wasn't great at the time. And I remember diving in deep to the Kicks vision.
This is before you joined Kicks?
This is before I joined Kicks. And I was drawn to Kicks because of the vision statement it had. To impact the world for Christ by preparing servant leaders who choose character before career, wisdom beyond scholarship, service above self, and a lifestyle of participation over apathy.
Wow.
And more than any other factor,
that was it.
that was it. So studying those vision statements of 19 organizations and seeing how vague some of them are, seeing how uninspiring some of them were, and then interviewing with the Kicks board and diving into that vision statement, I was drawn. And so I would say that really, I went from like dreams and ambition to vision, being vision driven at that point. So I would really point that down as like the first interaction with true vision in my life and leadership, and being drawn to a role based not on salary, not on size of school, not all these other factors, but what's the vision that's here?
Wow.
And then understanding the backstory of that vision and how that backstory dated back to 1994 after the genocide against the Tutsi.
Wow.
And all the steps that God had played along the way, and to realize, wow, this vision is bigger than one person. This vision has spanned multiple families, and this vision needs to be called out to life. And so after we were asked to serve in the role, my very first parent meeting, parents and staff at Kicks, I think it was within the first 2 weeks of my tenure as director, I put the vision statement of Kicks on the screen. And again, I was the third director in a school in 3 years.
Yes.
So there was lots of transition at the top.
Yes.
So you had to build a lot of trust out of the director's office. And I said, friends, I'm here to tell you from this moment forward, everything we do at Kicks will be based on our vision. And I believe if we live out our vision, we'll become the best school on the continent of Africa.
Wow.
People wanted me fired after I made that statement. Who is this guy?
You're giving them a crazy idea.
What does he think? What about being the best? And I wasn't saying our goal was to be the best. I was saying if we live this out, the natural byproduct is that we become the best.
The outcome will be...
Yeah. And so to this day, I've never measured, are we the best at this, and this?
Are we pursuing that vision?
That's right. Do we have measurements in place for our teachers in their evaluations to see how does vision show up in their classroom? Do we have questions in our interview process on vision before we say yes to someone? Are we instilling this into our graduates and our students? How so? So those are the things that we've done. And I would say from there, Hassan, it is like, just like you said, it just comes out of me.
It does, yeah.
And I love it. And I feel so at home in it that it's really hard for me to... Like I don't have a different frame.
Wow.
Right? So when someone asks me, "Hey, this is the box we want you in," like that doesn't really work for me.
Wow.
And so that doesn't have to be everybody's call.
Yeah.
Right? You can't have multiple visionaries leading an organization, right? But you do have to have a clear vision.
Yes. Sense of direction.
You have to, as a leader, you are the chief steward of that vision that God has entrusted to you. And he might not have entrusted it to the person sitting across the table from you.
Wow.
And that's okay, right? Their part, like in both my organizations, we have people who believe in the vision, are on board with the vision, but they're not necessarily having to carry the vision in the same way I am. They're implementing the vision.
Yes.
Right? And that's great because we need that also. But it has to all be about the vision. And so then that that's played out into my family. So we have a family vision mission statement as a family.
You have a family vision and mission statement.
Yeah.
Speak a little bit into that, because that's quite interesting.
Yeah. So, I was, like, to me, if everything else in my life fails in terms of what I put my hand to, there may be ways that I believe God will judge me on that, right? Was I faithful with it? Was I unfaithful with it? Right? But all of that, all of this is out of our control. And I'm so heavy on vision that it dawned on me, what's our family vision statement? I knew what I wanted for our family, but had I ever expressed that formally to our family? Have I, just like I would with an organization, did they get to play any part in shaping what the vision is?
Wow.
And so we went through a process. It was with a good friend of mine, super smart guy. I won't tell you his title, but Mark, if you're listening, this is you.
Shout out to you, Mark.
Yeah. And incredibly successful. And he, as we were visiting, as we were getting to know each other better, he told me about his family mission statement. And I was like, hold on, Mark, tell me more about that. Let's dive in. And he told me how he did it. He told me what it looked like. And then I just started to pray through that process and started to include our family. Hey, guys, what is important to you about our family? What do you want to be true for our family? And so I had to drive the process, but I
obviously
included all of them. So things like, some of the kids, I'm looking back on my notes, interesting, funny, brave, awesome, Christ-centered, together, travel, laughter, family, best, God, smart, curious, selfless. And so we got to a place where I was able to take all of that together and then crafted a statement with their help that I was then able to present to them. And so that for us is our North Star, right?
It's amazing.
Yes, Jesus is our ultimate North Star, but we believe that this statement is it as well. And so, for us, we are sons and daughters of the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. We are strong and courageous wherever and whatever God calls us to. We are together both when we are near and when we are far.
Wow.
We like to say and. We love to laugh and we love to learn. We are Team Thomas. And
That's so profound.
And so we have that
so
on a wooden board.
Plaque somewhere.
Yeah, right outside of our kitchen so everybody sees it.
Wow.
Every day. There's times that we pray through that. There's times in family conversations that we refer to it. We're 2 years away, 2.5 years away from our oldest going off to college, and Team Thomas is no longer 6 people in one house. So we even had
near and far, we're together.
We had to think ahead to say, how does this hold true even when we're not all under the same roof?
And I really love that, Thomas, about being able to craft a vision and thinking generationally. And you've been able to cascade it down to your own family. And you thought ahead. You were like, we believe in the cohesion of Team Thomas. But the reality is the kids are going to move to college, find their own families in the future. But you've sown such a great seed that this DNA of selflessness, Christ-likeness, you can bet on it that it will go on to the next generations. And for me, that gives me a much clearer picture of the way you define and embody vision as Thomas, both through your work and even in your family. I mean, it speaks so loudly in such statements.
Amen.
How would you then...
Well, let me just pause there, Hassan, and say, for those that are listening who believe in God and prayer, like, this is definitely one way you could pray for me.
Yes.
Right? And pray for my kids and pray for my wife. Like, just that, yes, Lord, may this be true. Right? May this be true, that the visions that God entrusts to them, call them to be strong and courageous in whatever it is God calls them to lead. Right? May it be true that, our identity is not based in what we do, but in whose we are. Right? And so, like, that's my prayer, and that's our hope, and that's how we point our kids forward. And
That's amazing.
I'll stop because I could keep going, but
No, but I feel, and I've learned quite a great deal from just listening to you. Guess what? I'm going to start working on my family vision, because it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
One thing that is a takeaway for me from this podcast is the value of intention. The value of intention, being intentional about certain things, even to the granular level.
Yeah.
It's quite amazing.
yeah.
Now, Ben, there are many listeners, leaders, or even people who are pursuing leadership that are listening to us, and they could be asking themselves, how can I develop a vision? What does it take? What's the process like? And is it cast in stone? Are there different ways that I could develop a vision? What would you advise in terms of giving a few tips and ways that someone could grow their ability to either develop a vision, but then for leaders to lead with vision?
Right.
Yeah.
So, that's a great question. So let me take the first one, which is, how do you cultivate a vision? And I would say a vision is actually cultivating in you. And so don't look outside of yourself.
Yeah.
Look in yourself. What are those areas that bring you so much joy? What are those areas that, when that gets talked about or you're experiencing that, you're feeling like I am right now, which is, why am I sitting down? I should be standing up. You guys can't see, but my hands are out. I'm animated because I'm talking about vision. So figure that out, do some self-reflection in you to say, where does that come out? And it might not be in your job. It might be what you're drawn to volunteer for, which is how it started for me. So I was coaching in the U.S. when we were living in the U.S. We have a local YMCA in our neighborhood, Fairborn YMCA, nice and strong. And that's where my kids learned how to play soccer or basketball. And I would always coach my kids' teams. They needed coaches, and I would coach more often than not. And so at this time, I wasn't formally working with kids. I was in the Athletes in Action role. And over the course of probably 6 months, I had multiple people come up to me and say, hey, Ben, you don't work with kids? You're great with kids. Why are you not working with kids all the time? And I would also find this joy that I had in my heart as I was around these kids. And I understand 5-year-old football, it's not for the faint of heart. It's, carrying kids in your arm and calling a timeout to let the parents know, hey,
it's okay.
It's okay. We're
Little
not.
John is not hard.
That's right. And this is not the professionals. Like, let's all just encourage them. And so I started to pay attention to that, Hassan, to say, wait, what is this about kids? And I do have this joy, and I still have this picture of this one boy, and I won't say his name, but that just captured my heart. And then so I just started to trace it back. And this one boy needed a strong male figure in his life. And in that coaching season, his guardians were able to say, hey, you provided that for him.
Wow.
And then I started to look back. I started at Mont Lawn Camp, and I loved it. I started in education and I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I've been doing this missions leadership thing. I love that too. And yet, so I found my way back to this love that I had, which then opened me up to come and serve at Kicks. And then now, like, my leadership definition revolves around children. My vision definition revolves around future generations. I'm constantly thinking about kids. I love, on Fridays, I do something called Funny Friday, where I tell great dad jokes to the kids at Kicks. And, and they're corny.
Of course.
But the kids
Dad jokes are usually corny.
Yeah, but the kids love it. And that's like, I'm drawn to that.
Would you say, sorry to cut you short,
No.
Is that the inspiration behind Be to the World as the organization?
Absolutely.
I'm tethering it back there.
That's right. Yeah.
Wow.
So all of that started not with this vision that was out there.
Yeah.
But that's where I would say often the vision's being cultivated in you. And so I had to go outside of my formal job to find it. I had to go outside of my formal circumstances. Well, that's then cultivated to leading a school. And then that's cultivated to launching a nonprofit, a for impact organization, where we say children are the center of our work.
Wow.
Our focus is on the child. No child chooses war. And so how do we bring restoration to children in countries that are experiencing war and conflict? And so that's the full circle.
It is the full circle.
So that's where I would say to those that are out there that are wondering, okay, what is this? Start in your heart. And then pay attention to what those around you are saying also. And do these match up with my personal goal, with my personal vision? When I'm in the organizational context, at our Beat of the World board meetings, we start off every board meeting reciting the Beat of the World vision and mission.
Wow.
As a way to remind everyone on the board is the chief custodians of the vision, of what the vision is. And we take a moment to reflect and then hopefully help us make those decisions. And then in your day-to-day, when you have a decision before you, and this is so hard, Hassan, because oftentimes the easier decision is not to choose what aligns with vision and mission. Getting more customers, more students, you've got to go back to the vision. And as the chief leader, as the CEO, as the leader of your company or your organization or yourself, you have to make the choice to steward the vision first and foremost.
Wow.
So even yesterday, I was just journaling this morning before I came. The Lord gave me clarity on vision and clarity on my role. In this season now, we've got a lot of shared leadership and distributive leadership, and all of those things are great. Sometimes the downside of that is I can defer what I shouldn't be deferring.
Yeah.
And yesterday was this crystal clear moment where the Lord said, Ben, don't defer. You're the chief carrier of this vision.
Yeah.
And I was able to...
There's certain things you cannot delegate.
You can't
even
delegate.
If you have
That's
shared
right.
leadership.
And so I think there were 4 decisions yesterday that boom, 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 that made in process with other people. And nobody walked away saying, Ben, I can't believe you did that. They all walked away saying, I have so much more clarity now, Ben. Thank you.
Wow.
And so that, so as a leader, you always have to keep that in mind. So however that works for you, if you need to write it on an index card, write it on an index card and keep it with you. But literally, when I said years ago, every decision we make will be based on vision, that's what we've tried to live out at Kicks. And as we've launched Beat of the World, that's what we've tried to live out as well. And then there's, there's a difference between, I'm learning there's a difference between messaging and methods, right? So, I always want to share the vision, and oftentimes it communicates well, but sometimes I got to granularly get that down to one story, one issue, one message in terms of, hey, what is Beat of the World? Like, I want to hit you with the vision.
Yeah.
That's not the question they're asking. They're asking, okay, no, what do you guys do?
Yeah. What are you about? Yeah.
What are you about? So I would also say to leaders, your messaging might look different than your vision, and that's okay.
Yeah.
That's not a betrayal of your vision.
No,
but
it's just to make it palatable to anybody that might ask.
Yeah. So in the
you.
day-to-day decision making, keep it in front of you. In the casting of what you do, make sure your messaging is tied with your vision, but doesn't always have to be the same.
Wow.
And then in major life choices, right? We all go through different seasons of our life. Let that personal vision be your guide, right? So when you have a personal vision, a family vision, an organizational vision, you've got these 3 guideposts for you to refer back to in whatever decision that you're making.
Wow. Thank you so much, Ben. I've really learned a ton in just half an hour. I mean, one of the things for me, my 2 takeaways is that it is possible to have a vision, not just for your organization, but your own personal life. And as a head of a family or even part of a family, to have a family vision if you're to think generationally. And then the other thing I've taken away is that a vision is cultivated from the inside. You have to look within and trace back and pay attention on the things that break your heart or get you excited. And that's where vision is born. It's
Absolutely.
amazing. As we close, 2 things I want to ask very quickly. Is there any one book you would recommend? Because I know you really can't fit everything in 30 minutes. What is that one book on vision that has inspired you, and one visionary that for you has inspired you greatly on your journey of leadership?
Yeah. Thanks, Hassan. And thanks for asking that way, because there's 2 books I want to recommend.
Okay,
so this
sure.
allows me to do both. So the very first time I came across this concept was more than 15 years ago. There's a book by Andy Stanley called Visioneering. Yep. And
Great book.
Really goes through the basics, the ABCs of developing a vision. So I would highly recommend Andy Stanley's book called Visioneering to give you the basics.
Sure.
And even beyond the basics, but just to give you a total frame of that. He goes through the book of Nehemiah and them rebuilding the wall. And so I think that's a great place to start.
Yeah.
So I often look to visionaries not in the present, but in the past.
Okay.
Because I want to see what is the work that has outlived them. So maybe the single most influential book on my life is a book called Delighted in God, the George Muller story, right? So it's titled George Muller, Delighted in God. It's by a man named Roger Steer. And so there's lots of applications for this.
Sure.
One of them is vision. And when George Muller, for those of you that don't know, started these orphanages, these children's homes in Bristol, England, and decided he wasn't going to ask for any money for their needs. But here's the why. He said, now if I, a poor man, simply by prayer and faith, obtained without asking any individual the means for establishing and carrying on an orphan house, there would be something which, with the Lord's blessing, might be instrumental in strengthening the faith of the children of God, besides being a testimony to the consciences of the unconverted of the reality of the things of God.
Wow.
So his why, his vision wasn't even about the kids, but it was about being a testimony to fellow Christians and then a testimony to unbelievers as well. And so we're still talking about George Muller long after he's gone. He's still upheld as this example of how do you believe God for the impossible and how do you see God provide. And wouldn't you know, towards the end of his life, he said, it wouldn't be too small to say that he received over 30,000 answers to prayer within the same day or the same hour that he prayed them. So for me, he's not a classic example of a visionary, but when you study his life, it's a beautiful example of what vision and visionary looks like, rooted in the belief of who God is and this belief that God wants us to call into existence a future that's not currently present.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Ben Thomas. The passion with which you talk about vision, I feel like we should have a part 2 of this. Thank you so much for the enlightenment you've given us, just your own learnings and your own application of vision. We hope, leaders out there, that each one in your own space, you're able to pursue vision and make it work for you, not just in your time, but also in the ages to come. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks for joining us today on the Strength and Courage podcast. Please share this episode with your friends and tag us on social media. Ben and Hassan are active across Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. You could follow Ben on Twitter and Instagram at Dr. Ben P. Thomas. You could follow Hassan on Twitter at Kibirango. Send us your questions via Twitter and we'll get back to you. Thanks to our sponsors at Be to the World. Visit www.betotheworld.org/donate to become a Be to the World ambassador today. Until next time, lead with strength and courage, because at least one person in this world needs you too.